get depressed. But just now, Elder Joseph read for us Psalm 42. If you listen carefully to the psalmist seems not to be in a very good physical or mental state. His fear of being downcast, he said, "My hope is in God," and he was actually in some kind of distress. And he used the word disquiet, which is a very old-fashioned word to mean that there's some mental or emotional distress. And so we realize that born-again Christians, sometimes they are haunted by the fact that, can I be distressed? Can I be anxious? Can I face PTSD? Now, although we are Christians, you must understand we are human. And we are exposed to all the vagaries of life and all the vicissitudes that confronts a person socially, emotionally, medically, as well as mentally. So one simple answer is yes, we are exposed to it. Now, you know John Denver and Winston Churchill, all of them suffer from depression. In fact, Spurgeon himself suffered from depression. And he's a wonderful servant of God. So as a result, sometimes we do struggle with discouragement and despair, and there are different levels of intensity. In addition, our lives may be affected spiritually, mentally, and socially. We cannot interact with people. We cannot go to work. So the Christian may be exposed to some form of mental and emotional distress that can cause the person to be affected and may require counseling, attention, and even medical intervention. So what is depression in the first place? Well, in a very simple term, depression is an affective condition of the mind and body. Primarily it's the mind, but actually it does affect the entire body. And there's a feeling of severe despondency and dejection. Sometimes it's triggered by biological or physiological imbalance, but sometimes it could be psychological as a result of an event that happened. And it has many phases. Now it presents itself in different forms. Somebody will be very quiet. Some people don't want to eat. Some people can't sleep. Some people sleep, they can't wake up, which can be symptoms of depression in different forms. And today we want to look at some of the symptoms and how we deal with it. In a non-clinical sense, we say that depression is a negative psychological reaction to events that happen to you. For example, somebody who lost a loved one can go into a form of depression. Somebody who has broken up a relationship with another person can be affected by depression. Sometimes we tell people I'm depressed. Now, in a clinical sense, while you may be sad or discouraged for one day, that's not clinical depression. You may feel discouraged for 1-2 days. A person to be diagnosed to be clinically depressed, it requires you to have a certain span of time and a certain number of the symptoms that later we talk about, at least 5 of them. So clinical depression is defined later in a more technical way. If a person is depressed over a month or so, then it is serious. But if it's just a 1 or 2 days, a person feels down and discouraged as a result of losing a job, as a result of having a quarrel with your wife or children, that may not constitute clinical depression. Now we're very interested in the precipitating factors sometimes that cause depression. So for example, I give some common examples that can cause a person to be exposed to some form of depression in your life. There are certain situations or events that can come back. For example, maybe somebody is stalking you, or you're having problems with a person in your office. As a result of the interpersonal conflict, it can cause depression. Okay. Personal factors like, for example, your own personal health habits. Certain things that you do, especially repetitively, can cause you as a result of the action to go into a bout of depression at some stage. Perceptive tendencies, the way you see things. For example, during the pandemic. Now the pandemic, we know that everybody needs to get a jab, everybody needs to be careful, wear a mask and all that. That's true, but do you know that as a result of us having that social distancing, you're not supposed to be close, it affected some people mentally and emotionally. In fact, we came back from Latin America in 2020, speaking in Chile. And the Latin American people used to hug each other. And as a result of the, what you call pandemic, they're not supposed to. So they always say, distancia, abrazo. They have to go at a distance, and it affected the relationship. During the pandemic, young children, they go to school and they have to wear a mask. So some of the children have never seen a smile in 3 years, when they go to school. Because every time they go to school, they wear the mask. Only when they come home, they see their parents. So they don't know how to react when other children smile. So it affected them psychologically and the interpersonal relationship. You see, all these things we don't know because we're just interested in the physiological effects. That means, are you okay, with your recovery from the symptoms? But we all forgot about the mental health issue. So later the government said, oh, let's deal with it. But that was already 2023. But 3 years have passed. Then we realized, oh, so sorry. We deal with the physiological, we forgot the psychological. And actually, sometimes the church also. We also forgot how to help our members to control. So, in the internal biological factors, sometimes there's a neurological imbalance. Later, I'll talk about some of this SSRI, which affects our serotonin and the dopamine. It will affect our mood, it will affect the way we behave, sometimes affect the way we sleep, and the way we do things. So, depression can come about. If you look at this, for example, this person, he can express it in helplessness. You see him, he doesn't want to talk. He comes to church or the office, he's down. And then he feels guilty, I should have done this for my mom. If I've come back earlier, my mom had not died, I remember there was one wife, he said, he blamed it on the ambulance. In Singapore, when you call the ambulance comes in 15 minutes for this. It's very fast. So for what? I don't know, because of the traffic jam, the ambulance came in half an hour and the husband died. So I think she was very angry. She blamed the ambulance driver, the people in the medical profession, and it was very, very difficult for her to get over it for a while. Anger, it express it in a very infuriated way. Sometimes we withdraw from people. Don't talk to me. Don't come near. I don't want to talk to anyone. And don't text me or so. And don't come to my house and don't call me. Sometimes we can't concentrate. What's going on the seminar? I kind of like I get distracted and I couldn't concentrate on the work. Sometimes we have suicidal thoughts. This is where we are most concerned about. When a person is suicidal, now depression, later you shall see what we call major depressive disorder, and later there's chronic depression or maniac depression, something is called bipolar. It can lead a person to have suicidal thoughts. I know of one drug addict, he told me that he went to he stays quite high up in the HDB flat. One day he was just looking down and there's a voice that jump down, jump. He had the tendency, he just don't know why, he just want to jump down. No reason. Then he didn't chat with me. I said, then what happened? He said, then I remember in the church we sang Amazing Grace. And she sang Amazing Grace, and later, thank God, he kind of overcome his thoughts of suicidal thoughts. I know of someone from another church whose husband took his life. But he fought depression for about 6-7 years, but ultimately he succumbed to it and he finally took an overdose and he left us. Sometimes it can be changes in appetite in that you don't want to eat. The normal things that you would like to eat, suddenly you have no desire. Energy loss, things you like to go hiking, swimming, and what's it? Hey, come, let's go for a swim. He said, forget it, you go on your own. This is not normal. Sleep problems, that's why antidepressants sometimes are being administered. This requires psychiatrists. They give you Prozac, Xanax and all that to control your serotonin. And sometimes can lead to alcohol and drug abuse. You don't admire all the Hollywood stars. A lot of them are into alcohol and drugs. A lot of them are depressed. Actually, many of them are suicidal. So don't look up to all of them. You may see them dancing on the stage and all that, they feel very good. After that, after all the adrenaline hype, most of them are messed up in their marriage, they're messed up in their mental life, they're totally not worthy of our example. So signs and symptoms, we are careful to make sure that we do not be affected by it. Now, causes. We cannot deny the fact that genetics have a part to play in this area of study. Actually, this is a specialty for Dr. Samuel Gunn. He's a PhD in cell biology. He studied DNA and RNA and all that. So we can't deny that there are some people that are more vulnerable. They're more what we call susceptible, to depression. It can run in the family. And it does not mean that you will experience depression just because your mother is depressed or your father is depressed. But there's a greater probability. that you may experience that, especially if you're closer in your blood ties. Life circumstances can also have an influence. As I talk about death of a loved one, maybe you're divorced, you lost a job, you have broken. I know of one of our young men, he broke up with his girlfriend, and he took a long time to recover, at least a few months, because he was so close and he thought that they were serious, but later the girlfriend left, and it took him a while to recover. So there are personality factors. Some people are a bit more melancholic and a bit more susceptible because of the nature of their personality type, and they're also affected by criticism in the office or by people. And some of these things does affect a person's spiritual and mental well-being. Now, medical illness can trigger depression. For example, a person who has long-term cancer, who has gone through a lot of treatment, a person who is facing a debilitating illness that cannot be cured, or you're always stuck to the bed, you're in a nursing home. So it's not just treating the physical symptoms. Sometimes you could think of the mental health of the person. All of us, if I put you in one room and put you there for 1 month, all of us will feel a bit of a mental distress. That's why during the pandemic, you know about this quarantine thing. It started out with 21 days, then 14 days, then 7 days. I know a sister, he traveled from Singapore to China. He was quarantined in Singapore. He went to the province. He was quarantined for 21 days. He went to the Sun. He was quarantined for another 7 days. By the time he saw his parents, he was quarantined for more than 1 month, including the Singapore side, the China side, and going to the Sun, the state. And then later, by the time he saw his parents for 2 weeks, he was quarantined for more than 1 month. It was really, really depressing in the early days of 2021. And it is affect people. Now, I put here at the end, be careful of this. In my experience of 32 years of pastoring, I know of people who have some kind of depressive disorder as a result of doing something that should do. For example, you know what tarot cards is? It's very popular in the US and Singapore. So young people play with tarot cards. There was a man in Washington, D.C. He went out shooting people he didn't know. He shoot bus drivers, he shoot children, he shoot people on the street. So they called up with him, the FBI said, why do you shoot these people? So he whipped up a tarot card, and the tarot card gave him the license to kill. So this is very common. And witchcraft, Harry Potter. Don't think that Harry Potter is a very fun book. Harry Potter deals with spell casting and witchcraft. There's no such thing as a good wizard. I know that Daniel was his name. He's a very good-looking guy. He's already in his 30s now. But Joel Rawlings actually used actual spells in the book. How do we know? Because the witch Coven said that and wanted to invite her to be the president of the Coven. And she later acknowledged that she actually used real spells in her book. And games, these role-playing games. Some of these games, anyone play Diablo? Okay, I'll let them know what Diablo. World of Warcraft. So some of these games, you actually fight against spirits from the graveyard and some imps and ghosts, and you go through a cemetery and you go in the house, and then there are different spirits coming in. There are some people who play even after that, they experience kind of mental distress, and they have dreams and nightmares. And I remember we had two young person in our church. In Singapore, there's some haunted house. I don't know whether Hong Kong has. So they went to this haunted house, apparently. And two of them thought it was quite funny. They went in the night, they shined torchlight, and it was an old hospital. And then finally, they heard something. So they jumped up and they went home. They thought, wow, good thing we left early. And now the haunted house is not in that place, it's in their room. So later they couldn't sleep. 18-year-old, they wake up their parents to go to the toilet. And later they came to us and the mother shared that this is what happened to them. And they've been dabbling with the account, even watching horror movies. Don't think that Pokemon is fun. Pokemon is a pocket demon. Japanese are very good at inventing all kinds of things. And all this have an effect when you dabble with the account. I know one particular person from another church, she prayed for the Lord to help her in her job. She didn't get it. She went to the temple to see a monk in the abbot. And the monk made her drink some water, burns and yellow water, yellow paper, and make her drink. After that, her mind was totally deranged. She see people chasing after her. Young children say, Pastor, be careful, the children are going to attack us. Then I realized she's getting schizophrenia, and we brought her to see a psychiatrist. And all started when she started dabbling with the other kind of religion or practices that you have to be careful about. So sometimes drug and alcohol abuse, which is getting more and more common among young people, is vaping a big thing here? Vaping, vape, in Singapore it's banned, but I think in Philippines and Malaysia, especially Thailand, you can buy vape, VAP.
Yes.
It's an electronic thing. This can cause an overdose and affects your mind, can cause depression. Sometimes during, maybe not in Hong Kong, but if you go to the West, like Canada and US, during winter, some people got what we call seasonal affective disorder, SAD. So during winter, because you can't go out, and nightfall comes at 4:30. Remember, we were studying, by 4:30 it's dark, and you can't go out because you don't want to go out, and then the next day, you only got half a day. So some people are affected by this. So it can, unrepentant sin is a problem that we know causes spiritual effect for depression. There's sometimes a psychiatrist, there's one Christian psychiatrist, she treated someone for many years, and all the medicine she gave him, and he took no help. And finally, he referred to a pastor and found out that the problem is not medical, the problem is spiritual. So, but the symptoms can be the same. It's very, very difficult to separate the two because they may come form in the same way. So it requires some form of discretion and discernment. So the doctors sometimes, when they put you through a certain test, psychoanalytical test, and they diagnose whether you have a certain form of depression. And if you do, then they'll put you through a certain course of medicine or cognitive therapy or behavioral therapy. So at least symptoms, later we're going to look at, it can appear in different forms in different people. So we don't look at one symptom. There must be at least 4 or 5 of them that come together to confirm that this person have a serious depressive disorder. For example, a person has a very anxious distress. Now, normally, I mean, we all can be worrying about our exams, we can be worrying about tomorrow, whether, we can get a job or all, and we kind of still can get along with life. When something is a disorder, it interferes with your life, in your normal life. So when somebody has this anxious distress and it affects the way, I know of somebody one day, he didn't go to school, I didn't go to work, he came to church. And I was thinking, hey, this is working time, 10 o'clock. So he ended up in church and I was in the office. Then I said, oh, good to see you, can I help you? He said, I just want to come here to pray and be alone. I said, sure. And then later I talked to him, he said, I don't want to go to the office. But I don't know where to go because I cannot go home because my wife is expecting me in the office. But I don't want to go to the office because I don't want to meet somebody in the office. So he's caught between not going to home, not going to the office, so he went to the church. And later we prayed and realized that he was suffering from some kind of depressive disorder as a result of something that happened in the office that caused a certain fear. So this person was running away. He can be running away from school or camp or church. Lack of motivation. Motivation has to do with your dopamine, and that has to be dealt with. This thing called melancholy. It's a state in which people feel downcast. Now the psalmist talk about himself. When the psalmist was going through, David was being chased by King Saul at one time, was being chased by Absalom, his own son, at one time, and then he fell into sin at one time. So he went through different stages of spiritual upheaval. And as a result, he experienced, if you find this coming up in the morning, especially when you wake up, and you feel particularly downcast and distressed, and you lose weight, you got no appetite to eat, you sleep very badly. I know some people, they can't sleep, an average of about 10% of people having some kind of sleep disorders. In Singapore now, most of the hospitals have a sleep clinic where they actually diagnose whether you have sleep apnea or all kinds of sleep related concerns. Sometimes it may be caused by depression, or especially worse still if you have suicidal thoughts, which is happen to everyone. So agitation, when somebody has depression, they can react in 2 ways. Once they get reticent, is very quiet. Agitated is the slightest thing they will react. Say, do you want to eat lunch? Go and eat your lunch. Why you keep asking me for lunch? When you just ask a question, do you want lunch? They get angry, or do you want to come to church? Or they get offended, or they get then you know that this is not normal and that person may be struggling with something. So this may be require some form of counseling therapy, especially you must see a trained specialist. Uh, Hopefully, if you're a Christian, you see your pastor or somebody who's trained in biblical counseling. But if you really need medication, you need to see a psychiatrist where medication and antidepressant can be given to you. So let's look at one of them. If you have a depression that lasts at least 2 years or more, psychologists and psychiatrists call this persistent depressive disorder, PDD. So this is normally they have to diagnose you over a period of time. They treat you with something first. But after 2 years, if you still do not recover, then they put you under this category. So last time we used to call dysthymia. Dysthymia is a low-grade persistent disorder, and later it will develop into chronic major disorder, depressive disorder, and then they will treat you with something more serious in medication. Okay. So what are the symptoms? There's a change in your appetite. You will sometimes, it's very interesting. Sometimes people don't eat. But there are occasions where some people overeat. So we cannot also limit it to just, it can happen both ways. And sleeping, some people don't wake up. They don't want to wake up. You wake them up at lunchtime, they don't wake up, they sleep all the way through lunch. That is also not a good sign. If you sleep too much or too little, your body reacts to it, and your mind is also affected by it. And this is important. Lack of energy, they're always a lot of fatigue and low motivation, and they don't want to do things. Let's go hiking, they don't want. Let's go to have a meal. They say, okay, you just pack noodles for me or whatever. That's something, if it happens over time, that's not a good sign. Low self-esteem, feeling of hopelessness or restlessness, especially the trouble making simple decisions. Let's take a bus, whatever. Let's go for a walk. Yes, do what you want. They can't handle normal day-to-day activities. That's this word that sometimes we hear people say bipolar. The word bipolar refers to a kind of, last time we used to be called mania depression. Now this person actually has very strong mood swings. That's why it's bipolar. One time it can be very happy, one time it can be very sad, and one time it can be very attentive, and sometimes it lost concentration, and sometimes he can eat a lot, and sometimes he will not eat. So it becomes a very contradictory behavioral pattern, and psychologists call it bipolar disorder. This is quite serious actually. If you have this, you require a psychiatric treatment. So medication will help you to bring this down, and later we look at some of them. And what we call your mood stabilizers, they normally interfere with your serotonin to increase it, and this SSRI that will manage your intake uptake. So this requires a medical professional and needs to be monitored, especially over a period of time. Now, just I mentioned something about what we call seasonal disorders. Winter. I think your winter is not so severe. Maybe if you're in Dongbei, in Harbin, my wife and I was there 4 times. I remember in November, I couldn't even speak properly. When I come out, it was -10. In Singapore, we never go beyond 25. So -10 was really beyond what I was shivering with four layers. So when we get into the hotel, you feel really warm. But when you're outside, and you get frost, I need to wear the beanie and all that. You can hardly see one another. And I realized that, well, this is tough. It's not easy. So during winter, especially the older people, they are more vulnerable because they can't go out. When it gets dark, it has an impact on your mental, psychological condition. Especially you can't go out because you're stuck in the house. Sometimes the snow comes in. The snow can be about 7 to 8 inches. And then you got to go out and shovel the snow. And this is almost everyday thing. I saw my sister doing in Washington, D.C. I said, wow, this is not easy. If the winter, sometimes because of the climate change, the winter can last for 4 to 5 months. It extends into spring, The spring becomes winter and people get affected. So with this thing called SAD, S-A-D, which can happen. Sometimes light therapy will help, but not always all the time is effective. But if really you're bad enough, they may administer some antidepressant. Like psychotic disorders are sometimes psychosis is where a person have mentally a kind of a misjudgment of the situation. You see things that are not there, you hear things we call hallucinations. You may have delusions, you believe in something that's not true. So So hallucinations is it's very real to you. You think of this and somebody is attacking you, or you see things moving in the house, and actually nothing moves, but he feels it that way. Delusion is something is not happening in the real world, but to you it's real. So I talk about this lady that feels that the children are gathering because the kindergarten children are gathering for assemblies. So they all gather together, and she said, "Pastor, be careful, they're going to attack us." And the children are all coming together for assembly before they go back at 12. So I was a bit surprised. Why did she say that? So I realized that yeah, she has this psychotic depression. So paranoia is this aspect that you have a wrong belief that people are going to do something to you. You know, maybe in the MRT, someone stand close to you and say, "Oh, this guy is trying to attack me." Or you're taking in a conference, and then somebody look at you and say that guy is stalking you or something. So you get this very, very adverse reaction. Sometimes they may even use ECT, a kind of electric convulsion treatment, which is in a very severe case to reorganize the neurotransmitters in a short treatment. So this is actually for women. Women, this is peripartum, postpartum depression, especially when you give birth. We know of a teacher one time she gave birth to her first child. Because the child cried so much, she refused to carry the child. She asked the husband to take away the baby from her because she couldn't stand the crying. And she also refused to breastfeed the baby. And she went into depression, and it took her more than a year to get over it. Some average of 1 in 10 gets that kind of depression, which can happen to any one of us. So don't think that, I mean, being a mother is not easy. You yourself have, you have lost a lot of blood and you're recovering, and at the same time, you can take care of another life. And if you don't have a supportive husband and mother-in-law, the problems can be multiplied for her, mentally and even psychologically. So, same thing for premenstrual dysphoric disorder. This especially happens to those who have a special time in the month. So they get mood swings, they get irritable, they get flushes and all, feeling of being overwhelmed and fatigue. Normally, people get over it, but some people may need medication, especially when it becomes very severe. And you need to see a doctor, your gynae will know what to do with you. They will give you some oral contraceptives. So treating resistant depression. Now, 1/3 of people who have depression normally may not have it totally cured. Okay. So psychiatrists will tell you, unlike normal medical problems where it's more obvious, you have a broken bone, the orthopedic will fix you up, you have a gynecological problem, the gynecologist will address it. But in mental problems, sometimes it's not so simple. It's a bit more complicated because you can't see physically what is the problem. So some of them requires a longer time for diagnosis because they try different drugs to see whether which one works and to see which level that you need the dosage. Now, the danger about this kind of antidepressants, some of them you get dependent on it, and they also have side effects. Because one form of drug will interfere with another part of your body. It may cause nausea, it may cause you to have mood swings, sleeplessness, and even constipation and others. So if you're diagnosed with this kind of treatment, sometimes they may need to use other form of treatment that ECT to overcome that. So one of the things that is commonly used by all the various psychiatrists is a kind of what we call selective serotonin reuptake inhibition. This interferes with your neurotransmitter. All of us have this thing called the serotonin in us, and it is produced by our brain, and it's a certain level. And some of us, we don't have the absorption of it, and the lesser of it that you get, it affects your mood, it affects your mental condition. So this SSRI is to increase the serotonin level at the right dosage. And they give you different things that Prozac, citalopram and paroxetine, and this at different aspects of your treatment, they will increase the dosage. Again, it's not something that you want to take for long term, but if you can, to use more of a lifestyle changes to complement and supplement this, so that one day hopefully you will not be better. So very advanced treatment is what we call electroconvulsive therapy. I think one of our someone I know, the husband went through that recently. So I visited him in the hospital, and after that he was kind of a little bit slow and affected, but after a few days he got better. So different people got different response. No, they actually put electrical impulses through your brain that rearrange some of your neurons, and hopefully the neurological imbalance can be corrected. Sometimes it works, sometimes it may need 2 or 3 times before they get it right. It depends. And they also use a kind of a transcranial magnetic stimulation. It's just like your MRI, but now it's on your brain, and they use it to stimulate certain neurons that's dysfunctional. Hopefully, it will correct it, but sometimes it may take a while to break the cycle of depression. This is quite new. It's a vagus nerve stimulation. It's actually more used in the States, and I think here also in Asia. This has to be administered by a psychiatrist. IMH is Institute of Mental Health in Singapore, and this is considered quite serious if you require this specialty. So treatment caution, all antidepressants has its own side effects. The doctor will tell you that. It doesn't mean you don't take. I mean, you still have to take if you need it, but the right dosage is important, and also lesser dependence over time. There's no proof that one particular drug is more effective than another. It depends on your own condition, and it depends on the other factors. Because sometimes you don't have one condition. You may have other medical conditions, and that makes it a bit more complicated. But the rule of thumb is not to be addicted or dependent on this medication, because there's a side effect, and sometimes if there's a genetic factor, then all this medicine may not be able to correct that. There may be something else you need to look at. So to some extent, a small percentage of people, they have a higher risk of getting depression. And common medicine like Prozac and Zoloft, this is the first line of SSRI that's normally given to a person. And if it doesn't work, if it's working, then of course that's wonderful. If not, then more other forms of psychotherapy or even cognitive therapy will come into place to support the family. We always encourage the family to be supporting the person, because medication is one thing, lifestyle is another, that you need to complement. Especially for a Christian, there are other things that we look into later. I'll explain from a biblical point of view. So, how antidepressant works? This is affecting in our brains. There is not this serotonin, there's dopamine that affects the way our mood, the way our mental health is. So each one of this medication deals with that, and either to increase it most of the time, and sometimes in rare cases to decrease it. And this is calibrated as a kind of affecting our neurotransmitter, and psychiatrists who are doing this, they will administer and monitor you over at least 2 to 3 weeks, and to re-evaluate and recalibrate the medication. So this is done probably by the trained practitioner. The antidepressant work all the time. I think you know that medication can work, and then sometimes it may not work for different people for various reasons. Doesn't mean you don't see a doctor, but you do, knowing that I know of some people who are on antidepressant for 15, 20 years, you know, and even they've taken it, it doesn't mean that they're out of the woods. It just manage the condition, but they can get back to the depressive mood. That's the reason why in extreme cases, the suicidal thoughts can be so severe that even the medication could not stop the person from taking it. So for such cases, actually they may have to be taken care of physically in an institution, especially for a period of time. The counseling, therapy involved as well. So normally we ask this question: is my depression severe enough to justify drug treatment? So don't be too quick. As a Christian, when we experience depression, I think first of all we examine ourselves. Why am I having this? Is it because of an event that happened? Now it's quite normal if your loved one passes away, somebody close to you. The level of a depressive effect on the person is understandable. Grief can last you for months. I know of one person, even after 7 years, she still go to the cemetery every week just to sit at the tombstone where the husband was buried. Yeah. So the grief that takes up to about 2 to 3 years, sometimes even. But the response to it, how the person deal with a normal life when you experience that event. So you need to ask yourself, is medication the best option? So don't jump into it straight away, but try to through other non-invasive therapy first, through counseling, through cognitive therapy and behavioral therapy, am I able to tolerate unwanted side effects? So you must always ask the doctor, what are the side effects? How will it interfere with my life if I take this? Maybe you're working, For example, just yesterday we had a pilot, and if you're going to be a pilot and you're going to take antidepressant and you're going to fly, it's going to be very difficult, because it can be quite severe. So, can non-drug treatment help my depression? By non-drug treatment, we refer to counseling, cognitive behavioral therapy, refer to lifestyle changes. For example, we would encourage people to exercise, to talk to someone. So a regular session, a counseling session, as well as, you see, when the mind and body is exposed, God has given us a wonderful nature around us. And that has an effect on our lives, especially when we get it, we are exposed to the elements that God has prepared for us. There was one journal in Scotland, one psychiatrist actually prescribed the patient to exercise 3 times a week in the woods. Not in the gym. In the gym is helpful way to lose weight, but not for mental health issue. But nature has its impact to a large extent. So sometimes when you feel down, go with your family for a walk. Go and take a break, change the environment, and try not to be overwhelmed with work or whatever that's bothering you. Because the mind that is overly obsessed or depressed with something, it does have a long-term effect on your mental health. So the problem is that I think Hong Kong and Singapore are the same. Sometimes we work very hard, 12 hours. You know, we're supposed to work 44 hours work week. By now, some people, they work 84 hours. 84 hours work. You try to do that, that means even Sunday they are working. The Lord is very merciful. The manufacturer's guide said this thing that I created, it works back in 6 days, and give you 1 day break for him to recover. If you waste 7 days and 7 days and 7 days, 21 days without break, I think 1 day, if you don't come apart and rest a while, you literally come apart, because your mental health will be affected. So you ask that, what strategies do I have time and motivation to pursue other treatment and personal excitement? What God-given strategy might help me to reduce my depression? So sometimes it's important for a Christian to be exposed, for example, to some form of biblical teaching or training, or to be involved in a fellowship context where you're in the presence of people. If you're able to talk about it to someone, that's normally a good step for you. The ability to express it is the first step that we help the person, and later, if there's some necessary changes to be made, then we prescribe that changes. If there's going to be medication, then that is the third stage. So this is something you want to decide. If I take my medication now, how should I take other spiritual options or therapy that's available for me? So in pedagogic counseling, we have different approach for people with different conditions that we look at. Okay, maybe before I look at I think I'll take a break first before we come back, because this will be on the Bible and it will take quite a fair bit of time. Maybe we take 10, 15 minutes. 20 minutes break. Okay, great. So that nobody will be depressed.